Dear all, my name is Michaela Brohm-Badry and I'm a professor for learning and instruction and didactics at the University of Trier in Germany. Hi. The case study method is often not recognized as fully fledged research method in the natural science, but also in empirical social sciences. Yet, in my opinion, it offers a lot of potential. I would like to present this today and talk about why we should not underestimate case studies. Let's take a look at the definition. Regarding to the term, Robert Yin states, a case study is an empirical inquiry that investigates a contemporary phenomenon within a real-life context, especially when the boundaries between phenomenon and context are not clearly evident, as they are in an experiment, for example. Let's take a look at the agenda. Firstly, I would like to present 4 popular biases in relation to case studies, and after each bias, explain in a break the bias what is factually more correct in this regard if we start from Yin's case study approach. An appreciative conclusion ends this presentation. 4 biases. Firstly, the golden standard of natural science and often also of social science research is a randomized control group study based on quantitative data. Case studies can only be preliminary studies to generate research questions. Secondly, case studies collect qualitative data and evaluate them. Thirdly, case studies tend to be subjective and often don't meet the quality criteria. Fourthly, case studies do not lead to generalizable results. To talk about the first bias, are case studies just preliminary studies? Educational neuroscience has its reference disciplines in the fields of psychology, educational science, and neuroscience. Let's take a look at some examples of case studies from these fields. First of all, psychology. Anna O. was a patient of Joseph Breuer and Sigmund Freud. She showed diverse symptoms. The case study of Anna O. was the beginning of the theory of hysteria for Sigmund Freud and the beginning of psychoanalysis. John B. Watson conducted an experiment in 1920 in which he presented little Albert 2 stimuli at the same time, a white rat and hammering on an iron pipe. It turned out that little Albert's fear of the loud hammering was tied to the rat. The case study proves classical conditioning. Or let's take a look at the educational case studies. Albert Bandura had adults handle dolls aggressively in 1963, and had children watch. It was shown that the children subsequently adopted the brutal behavior and also hit, insulted, and kicked the doll. These studies were the beginning of research on model learning. Maria Montessori observed her children and conducted written analyses of the individual cases. Her case studies provided the theoretical foundation of her educational theory. Let's take a look at Jean Piaget. He interacted with children and observed them and gave them specific tasks. His case studies led to his theory of cognitive developmental stages. Let's take a look at the case studies in neuroscience now. Some examples. Phineas Gage was a railway worker and had a serious accident in 1848 during a blasting operation in which an iron bar pierced his head from bottom to top. He survived the accident and his cognitive abilities were largely restored. However, there was a marked change in his personality, which now became childlike and unreliable. Neuroscience was able to prove from his case that the executive functions of the brain are certainly located in the prefrontal cortex. Patient HM had suffered from epileptic seizures since childhood. In 1953, he underwent a neurosurgical operation in which large parts of his temporal lobe, including the hippocampus, were removed. His epilepsy largely disappeared, but HM could no longer learn any new content that was not motor-based. His case led to far-reaching findings in neuroscience about the involvement of the temporal lobes and hippocampus in memory functions. In a case study, the French surgeon Paul Broca examined a patient who had extensive aphasia, speech disorders, and could only speak the syllable 10. His patient was named after this syllable. After the patient's death, Broca performed an autopsy of his brain and found a severe lesion in the left temporal lobe, which was caused by syphilis. Broca suspected that the speech center of language production must be located there. Broca's area was named after him. So, there are famous clinical and non-clinical case studies in psychology, education, and neuroscience. Psychology, education, and neuroscience still show this strong tradition in case studies. So, correct is, case studies have always generated fundamental insights as independent studies in the three disciplines of education and neuroscience. Secondly, the bias about database. Yin explains that there are 6 resources of evidence in case studies: documentations, archival records, interviews, direct observations, participant observations, and physical artifacts. So multiple sources are included in case studies. Resources of qualitative and quantitative data and multiple methods of analysis. So, correct is, case studies lead to a holistic picture of the issues because the current case study design, as suggested by Yin, can incorporate and process qualitative and quantitative data. Thirdly, the quality criteria. Yin explains the following tactics: construct validity, for example, by the use of multiple sources of evidence, establishing change of evidence; internal validity, for do the pattern matching, address rival explanations, use logical models; external validation, by the use of theory in single-based studies, use replication in multiple case studies; and reliability, the use of case study protocols, develop case studies base, and so on. So, correct is, case study research can achieve both highly validity and reliability through the use of specific research tactics. And fourthly, generalizable results. Yin explains that case study results are generalizable in terms of theoretical assumptions, but not in terms of populations. Accordingly, it is an analytical generalization. but not a statistical one. The findings about particular phenomena, how and why, can be transferred to similar phenomena. If a child sees an adult hitting a doll, as in the Bobo doll experiment, it tends to adopt this behavior. It has learned from the model. If it sees an adult giving money to a beggar, it will probably also learn this behavior from the model. Model learning is therefore analytically realizable. Correct is, results of case studies are not statistically generalizable, but they are generalizable with regard to the theoretical basic assumptions of the case. Conclusion. If case studies are conducted according to scientific criteria, they can generate fundamental knowledge through qualitative and quantitative data collection and analyze in order to understand a phenomenon holistically and thus in a true profound way. Thank you. Bye.